Hello, it is Wine and Wisdom, and tonight we have an amazing guest who I'm going to introduce you in a minute. He's got a different shape than I have, which I'll ask him about in a moment. But what is this Wine and Wisdom show? So firstly, cheers. I hope you've got your glass of wine. I'd love you to tell me in the comments whether you have a glass of red, a glass of white, a beer, a bubbles, what is it? But in this time, especially right now of social isolation, having a wine together virtually is a really beautiful way for us to stay connected, and our social health is so very important. And that is why just having these kind of casual conversations where we can share stories, share wine, share laughter, and share wisdom is so important to our society right now. And speaking of wisdom, the whole idea, the other half of that title is that I have been lucky enough to surround myself with amazing people all my life. And I really wanted to bring them onto this show so I could ask some questions and share their wisdom with you, whether you're watching right now or whether you'll be watching this as in the future. So tonight I have someone, he's so unique and fabulous, and his wisdom is so deep and long. And I think especially during this time of crisis that we're all going through, where there is so much uncertainty and stress and change, to have somebody who's actually been in the most high level, high pressured moments that any of us could ever imagine, is here to share his wisdom tonight on how we can better deal with crisis, how we can better make sure that our organisations are resilient enough to get through this really very volatile time. And he's going to share the insights that he has learned on the front line in places like Afghanistan. So I would like to now introduce you to the incredible Jeremy Holder. Cheers to you, Jeremy. What is in your glass?
Cheers, Heidi. I'm not a wine drinker, unfortunately, so I've got rum.
Oh, you got rum.
Rum. I'm a rum drinker, and especially with the kids being now week 2 and a bit for us of being home and homeschool, it's definitely time for a rum too. So definitely. My wife doesn't normally drink, and I think even she's drinking Baileys right now with the kids.
I love it. Well, I have to say, I've never thought that I was a rum drinker ever, but I had an incredible holiday in Cuba earlier this year, and that's all they drink. And I had some amazing rum, as we used to call them, rum experiences in Cuba. So good on you for having your rum.
Well, this is a Caribbean spiced rum.
Is it?
I'm not sure. Yeah, and it's called 7 fathoms. So they actually barrel the rum and take it down to 7 fathoms depth underwater, and they let it age underwater at pressure at 7 fathoms. So a very cool story. Yeah, it's handwritten in pencil, numbered bottles. So yeah.
And can I just say, these are the things, the wisdom that we hear on the Wine and Wisdom show. So thank you for sharing that story. But Jeremy, what I'd love you to start off with just telling everybody who you are, what you do, and also about the positive impact that you are making in this world.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you very much for that very nice, very bubbly intro. Very humbled to be on the show. So my name's Jeremy Holder. I'm the founder and managing director of a company called TacMed Australia. We're a first aid company, veteran owned and operated, and we specialise in bringing all the lessons that we've learned on the battlefield, like Iraq and Afghanistan, counter-terrorism, and also the streets of our sort of cities. And we take those lessons learned and we pass them on to mainly first responders who work in high threat environments. So police, military, government first responders, who we primarily work with. I started it, this is our 10th year. So I'm starting to feel a bit old saying that, but 10 years ago I started it in my spare room in Sydney. And so we do a lot of things. We do equipment, we do training, we do consultancy. You know, one of the things we're very, very proud of to have played a part in recently, we were recognised at the World Policing Awards in London at the end of last year, where the program, the tactical first aid program, we helped sort of Queensland Police start, won an award for innovation, which is cool. But for me, the best thing for me is that in the 2 years that since the program's been rolled out and we've been supporting it, Queensland Police have saved over 40 lives with the training and equipment that we've helped provide. And again, we didn't save those lives at all, but it's just amazing that we've played, you know, a very small part into 40 people being able to go home to their families. So very proud to have been a part of that.
Well, you know, I mean, it's just the proof in the pudding of how small things can have really big impacts. And for you, what you think is such a small part has actually been a huge impact for many, many people. So, and I just want to say, talking about awards, I'm not going to let this slip because I know that you are a finalist in a very, very special award here in Australia right now. Can you please, I'm not going to let this slip, so please tell everybody what that award is that you're a finalist in.
Sure. Yes, I'm very lucky to have been nominated as a finalist for the Department of Veteran Affairs Prime Minister's Veterans Awards for Entrepreneur of the Year. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? After a run. So yeah, Entrepreneur of the Year finalist for the Prime Minister's Veterans Awards. I think it was last week. It was meant to have been announced, and we were heading down to Canberra to go to the Great Hall in Parliament House for the awards ceremony to find out who the winner was. But unfortunately, COVID-19 got in the way of that. So I'm not sure when it's going to be announced, to be honest, but it's postponed for I don't know how long.
COVID-19 seems to be getting in the way of a few things, doesn't it? But we have no doubt, I mean, even being a finalist is extraordinary. Huge. And we look forward to finding out, Jeremy, when those awards will be. But I'd love you now to talk about you know, was there a defining moment, either in your job or in your life, that has made you now do what you're doing, made you start the business and made you create the training and services and products that you offer at TacMed Australia?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, I don't like to think there's anything that particularly defines me of who I am as such, but there's certainly been you know, probably a number of incidents or moments in my life and career that's very much pushed me in the direction that I'm now in. One of the big ones for me to get into or to continue that in sort of the medical training equipment and whatnot was one, just I absolutely love it. It's been, you know, I left high school at 17 and joined the army, and then over time deployed to Afghanistan, and there was certainly lots of things over there that was for, you know, 21. I turned 22 in Afghanistan, so yeah, deployed at 21. I turned 22 over there, and you know, looking in hindsight now, it's pretty crazy to think of the you know, to be that young, relatively inexperienced in what I did. You know, only a few years doing it, and most of that's training and whatnot. To have the lives of sort of 40 other men in your hands as a sole medic in the middle of nowhere, certainly no backup coming for any short period of time, was pretty crazy looking back on it now. And then we had lots of different things that sort of made me learn very quickly and whatnot. But one of the big moments was we were coming near the end of our deployment, actually, and we had a call come in that there was a helicopter coming in with 3 children that had been injured with a landmine. And so we, you know, obviously prepped all of our resuscitation bays and whatnot, and the helicopter landed and they brought these 3 children into the resus bays, and we were there with some Americans We all split into teams. We were treating a young boy, probably maybe, I don't know, 10 or 11-ish. And there was about a 3-year-old girl, and then I believe an 8 or 9-year-old girl on the other side. And over time, we sort of saw some commotion happening over on that bed. So we went to help, and to make a long story short, the young girl had stepped on the landmine and had a very, very gruesome injury to her leg. And the medics out in the field applied an arterial tourniquet and saved this girl. So this little girl had just enough blood circulating through her body to keep her alive. Unfortunately, a very junior coalition medic, not an Australian, very junior medic, took it upon himself to release that tourniquet to check the bleeding and to see it had stopped or if the wound was enough. So unfortunately, the blood, when he released that tourniquet, the blood she had popped the clot, and she bled out and she died.
Oh
so to me, that was just, a 8 or 9-year-old girl. And I tell you what, I'm very glad I didn't have kids at the time, because, you're as a medic, you always used to hear about the older guys say, our kids will change your life, or kids. But for me, that was just another patient at the time. Now that I had kids, and especially now I have an 8-year-old son, I think that'd be completely different. And yeah, there's no, it's not to say that the little girl wouldn't have died of infection or maybe her wounds later on, but certainly she didn't have to die from that. So for me, that was something that was very a huge lesson learned, and I never wanted to have someone die of a preventable death again. And so that for me was a big driving factor in bringing in some of the equipment that we now bring in, and certainly the training we do. And on a positive note, like that training and whatnot that we now deliver, a few years ago now, but you may have heard it on the news where a New South Wales police highway police officer was hit by a tradesman texting on his phone. I'm not sure if you heard about that down in Sydney a few years ago.
I remember.
And so when the police, what's that? Sorry.
No, go on. Sorry. Yeah.
You got me still?
Yeah, just broke up.
We're having the technical issues again.
No, you're back. Yay.
Okay. Yeah, cool. And so the police officer was hit by this tradie texting on his phone, and he sort of woke up on the ground, and he's looked under the highway patrol car that was badly damaged, and he's seen the foot, and his partner was there standing with him when they were getting traffic cones out of the car. And he's gone to grab his mate's foot, and he's yelled at his mate, grab his foot to pull him to see if he's all right. And he's just had this excruciating pain in his leg, and he's looked, and it was actually his leg that had been amputated in the incident. It was just being held on by a few ligaments. Now he'd done one of our first courses that we'd run a number of years ago. He'd actually bought his own trauma kit off our website and had it in his highway car. But due to his injuries and due to how bad his car was busted up, he was unable to access that. And so the police officers on scene thought they were doing the right thing. They've taken off their belts and they're trying to apply a tourniquet to his leg, and it wasn't working. Belts have been pretty much proven that they're ineffective without a windlass. And so he's asking for his tourniquet, TacMed tourniquet. And coincidentally, in the area was a canine police officer, and he'd bought his own tourniquet off our website and had it on his belt. So he's arrived, and he's got his tourniquet and he's placed it around the officer's leg, and he started doing it up. And tourniquets are very painful. Obviously, you need the pressure that's going to constrict the muscles to stop the blood flow, and it's very painful, especially when your leg's been amputated quite badly. So he's as he started to tighten, the police officers yelled in pain and sort of fainted. And so he stopped turning, and the officer's woken up, and he knows that he's got to keep turning it. It's painful. So he's himself giving the commands, turn, turn, turn. And again, he'd pass out and wake up and tell him. So he's had the mindset to, after doing our training, to be able to know that you've got to tighten that tourniquet. And, he was my age. He had 2 kids about the same age as my kids. And thankfully, because of the actions of obviously himself and his sort of mindset and knowledge, and then that of the other police officer, he was able to go home and eventually go back to duty with a prosthetic leg. So
Wow.
it was amazing that something, you know, when you look back on it now, something that happened in 2006 has now led on to so many factors that this guy can go home to his family.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy, they're amazing stories, and I mean, what it brings up for me is that education is the key. I mean, I've always believed I've got education in my DNA, because education changes lives, right? And the education and the training that you can give to, whether it was on the battlefield in Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan, or if it's to our amazing first responders here in Australia, or even I know that you're also doing training in workplaces around, well, what happens when one of your staff members has a heart attack? Do you know what to do? When you call 000 and call the ambulance, do you know the cross streets for them to be able to park? And how do they get up onto your floor? And all this is about education, isn't it? That it's this training that is necessary.
Yeah, and it's not complex. It's, you know, it's a little bit of education, and it's relatively basic stuff. But a lot of people just don't know it, and it's you know, the average emergency response time for an ambulance in Australia is 10.4 minutes. So you've got, let's just say, 10 minutes that patient is potentially got some preventable causes of death that you, with some simple interventions, you can have a massive difference on the outcome of that person. And there's lots of things that can lead up to that. And so, yeah, I think education and having plans is a huge part of that. And we say that all the time to clients. We would much rather you do some training before we sell you equipment, because otherwise you've just paid some money for things you don't know really how to use.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I know for everyone right now, there is just all, you know, workplaces have been very disrupted, and people are working from home, and everyone's in kind of this operational, how do we continue to operate? But you and I both know that whether it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, we're going to come out of operational, and we're going to have to continue to train our people in those necessary things, with either with professional development, either technical or non-technical, the health and safety aspects that you train people in, so that during crisis, during something that is life-threatening, that there are people within an organisation who can actually do what it takes to prevent that death if there's only 10 minutes until a first responder comes. And I think it's really worth us. I mean, I know it's like speaking to the converted, you and I, with this, but I know that you are a great believer in the fact that we will need to get back to training and development eventually, won't we?
Oh, definitely. Like this is, you know, I think it'd be naive for us to say that we're going to go back to normal after this COVID is over, but we will get through it. There's no doubt about that. When? No, nobody knows, but we will get through this, and you know, once we are on the other side of this, it's going to go back to something. And you know, I think I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason. So this is, whilst it's really shitty, I think it's happened for a reason, and hopefully there'll be a lot of things that come out of it that for the good, you know, and who knows? Well, again, it'll be retrospective when we look back on it, and everything happens for a reason. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd love you to share right now with you know, the leaders within organisations who are really grappling with how to do this at the moment. It's such unknown territory on how to lead people, teams, businesses, you know, even solopreneurs, how to lead themselves. From someone who has been on the front line in such crisis, in such high pressured times, I mean, the crises that you've been in, you know, on the front line are different to the ones that we have now, but it's kind of same but different, right? It's still a crisis, and we still need to be equipped with tools and strategies to get through that. So do you have like 1, 2 or 3 top tips to help people who are trying to deal with this crisis, try to deal with these high pressure times, on how to navigate through it?
Yeah, I suppose, I'll put out a disclaimer. I'm far from perfect, and I'm learning all the time. And I don't know who said it. Was it Muhammad Ali said that everyone's got a plan until you get smacked in the punch in the face? Or was it Muhammad?
Sounds like something he'd say.
Yeah, you've always got a plan hopping in the ring until you get that first punch in the face. So I think that's something that I've learned really. It's been a big takeaway from my time in the military. And when we were going out on kinetic operations outside the Y, obviously you don't plan to fail, but we would have a lot of the time work on a pace methodology. So we would have a primary plan that, your plan A, that if everything goes well, we're going to fly in, land here, kick in this door, kill or capture this bad dude, hop on the same plane and take off. But then you'd have like an alternative plan. So plan B. So, you'd fly in and maybe they heard you coming or were told, so they've met you, and, you come up against a force at that area. So you have to go around to another side of the village or building or anything like that. So you've got an alternative plan. Sometimes that doesn't work. And so you'd have contingency and emergency plans, so PACE. So a lot of the time would have multiple plans, and everyone would know them. And some of them, definitely primary plan is generally well structured with quite a lot of detail, so everyone would know what their role is, where they need to be, when they need to be there, and what they need to do. And that was very, very clear to everyone, from the platoon commander down to the young, skinny, red-headed, terrible bearded medic. So everyone would know that. So it's very clear. And then, so same with the alternative, contingency, emergency, everyone would know, but they wouldn't be as detailed in the other plans, because when it's that fluid and dynamic, like we are now in this COVID situation, that you just can't plan it in that much detail. But I think you still need to have a plan, and certainly a contingency and emergency plan as a last ditch effort. So that's one of my big ones, is have a plan, and B, C, and D plans as well.
Yeah, I think we're seeing, going into plan B, C, and D, even E. It's changing so quickly that it's so hard to stick to it. But there is something about having a focus, and, even if that plan is going to be different in 1 day, 2 days, 1 week time, the fact that you've been able to come up with this and stick to it for the period of time that it's been useful, when we're all struggling with being able to have any kind of control, because we've lost control out of everything. But having control over just setting a plan, even if you never get to put it in place, it actually makes you feel pretty good, doesn't it? It gives you the confidence that I can do this, and I'm going to get through it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really important, I think it's so important. I made it one of our company values is agility as well, having not just your own mindset, but a whole culture of your team to be agile, to be able to, I think we were talking about it earlier today in another group with the reset and reinvent. And I think it's really important that for us, as a company of 15 full-time people, that we maintain that culture of agility as we grow to a bigger company, that, you still maintain agility. Because it really, if something happens, this is obviously the most extreme example of a worldwide pandemic, but it's really important to be dynamic and agile in your plans.
And you going into kind of the scenario you just described on the front line, if you felt that the only way that you're going to get through that and have, you know, come out the other end with your life, really, because that's what it would boil down to, was if everything was in plan A. You know, if you thought the only way we're going to come out alive is if plan A works, then you're not going to go into that situation very confident, are you? You've got to know that we have a plan B, C, and D. We know how to be agile, and we know how to respond really, really quickly when things don't go to plan. And I mean, that is a wonderful insight I'm hearing from you about how that on the front line converts into this crisis that leaders are trying to deal with right now, on how do we just continue to reinvent our plans day by day.
If you've only got that plan A and it's stringently, you know, it's followed to the death, and then you're planning to fail. You really are. So it's you know, and I think a lot of the times, certainly in operations and then very much in business, that I always, you know, that the plan is that A, if it's well thought out, then hopefully A is going to work. But I think it's naive and silly to not have any other plan B, C, and D as an emergency.
And Jeremy, we may have already answered that with with what we've just discussed. But I mean, you've led teams now. You've led teams with what you were doing in the armed forces, and you've been leading teams within your business for 10 years now. And even, you know, when you're doing training for people, you're leading a team. You're leading all different teams of teams that you've only met for the very first time. So to me, you're kind of a master at it. By the way, I don't know if you know that about yourself, but you are a master at it. So
thank you. I don't think so. I think there's still a lot to learn.
Oh, we've all, but that's good to know that we've all got a lot to learn. But still, even when we're a master like you, but you know, what would be your number one tip when it comes to leading teams and performance and ensuring that they are performing to the best of their ability, whether it's in these times of crisis, which we're having to draw different ways of bringing up performance of everybody, or whether it's just in normal working life? What's your number one tip for that?
I don't know if it's my number one tip, and I think it's for me, and I'm not sure even where I learned it from, theory-wise, but for me, it's really about people and making sure that the people that on your bus are the right people, and not just the right people, but they're also in the right seat on that bus. And I by no means made this up. I'm sure I've read this in a book. I just don't know who. But it was the same in the army. Like, it was make sure you had the right people, especially in special operations. It was, it was very selective about who went there. So you'd have the right people on the bus, but they'd be in the right seat. And so by having the right people in the right job, that's, to me, is one of the biggest things. The next thing is going to be, for me, I'm probably the opposite of a micromanager. So for me, like, I know I've got the right people. We've got an amazing team, and so for me, it's give them a mission, give them what I want the end goal is. But for the people I hire, I try to hire people that are way better at what they're doing than I am. So the best thing for me to do is to give them the mission and let them get there. And just to help them, for me, it's try and minimise the roadblocks for their job to get to where we need to be. So I really don't micromanage the team, or I just try to give them the mission and stay out of their way. Try to give them ownership in that role and that mission as well, so to help them come up with those primary, alternative, contingency, emergency plans, and let them get there. So
I think if you've got smart adults on your team, they don't actually like being micromanaged either. So I think that's a great way to really turn up. And I'm just remembering, I believe that getting the right bum on the right seat on the bus, Jim Collins' Good to Great, was that the book, do you think? Have you read that one? Because that's how I'm remembering it.
You know what? I think it is. I think you're right.
Yeah, I think it is. Anyway, thank you, Jim. If you weren't the first one, we acknowledge you for that. Okay, I have one final question for you, and that is, out of everything that you have been taught and learned and handed down, what do you consider the wisest piece of wisdom that you have been given, and why?
The wisest piece of wisdom. I think there's probably a couple of things, but one of the ones that I'm a big believer on is that if you need to make, if something goes bad or it's just a really important decision, is to try and not be emotive. And so the best bit of advice, and it might have even been my dad that told me this, to be honest, is just to sleep on it. So, you know, even if you've drafted that email or drafted that plan, we're going to have a difficult conversation or anything like that, is to just sleep on it. Get it out there, get it on paper, get it on the computer, whatever you need to do. But just to sleep on it. It's very rare that something can't wait that 12 hours overnight. And that can make a huge difference by sleeping on it, letting the emotions sort of cool down, that cortisol to get out of your system to then make that decision. And, a lot of the time I'll get to work that next morning and either delete that email or, cancel that plan of that conversation and have a very difficult conversation. So that's a big one for me. And then the other one, which I was reminded of this week with actually one of my newest employees who I poached from the army. She's an amazing young medic who we've brought onto our training team. And poor thing, after 12 years of stable government employment, within 6 weeks of her joining us, we're at the toughest time in business I've ever experienced and hope will ever experience. And and she's like, "Oh, you're pretty cool and calm about this." And my first thing was thinking about that duck that's floating on the water, looking cool, but then underneath it's just paddling like mad. But it just come down to perspective. And so for me, I try to have a lot of perspective on things, and I think that's something I'd like to pass on as my sort of big thing. Is Pet, the girl I'm talking to, she's deployed to Afghanistan with special operations as well, first female to do so. And so she understands, I'm like, Pep, we're not getting shot at. Our lives aren't at risk in this. Generally speaking, I know it is a pandemic, but for most young, fit people, it's a very much, the statistics show it is a lot smaller. But in terms of the business being tough at the moment, my life's not in danger. My kids' lives aren't in danger from economic or the business. I said, what's the worst that's going to happen? I lose my house. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to lose my house, but I'm still not getting shot at. I'm not going to take a step out to get my newspaper and step on a landmine. There's nothing it's when it comes down to it. We live in a pretty amazing, I think one of the world's best country, and I think we're very lucky. And it's just that perspective of things. Sometimes when you get worked up or something's not going your way, chances are I'm still going to be alive tomorrow morning. So.
Well, fingers crossed.
Perspective.
It is, and I thank you for saying that out loud because, for most of us, we haven't been in situations where the possibility of, walking out of our home or tent or wherever is a risk of stepping on a landmine and either losing our lives or losing a limb or, being shot at when we're just walking down the street, where so many people are dealing with that day by day. So, Jeremy, I want to thank you firstly for representing our country and serving our country in the way that you have in the past. But not only that, the way you have represented and are servicing our country right now, because whatever way you look at it, we are going through a crisis. And I think if you've got someone like Jeremy on your team who can advise you and mentor you on firstly, putting things in perspective, and secondly, being able to help you navigate out of this crisis. I mean, wow. I mean, could you ask for a better person to help you with that? So for those who are watching, he doesn't know I'm like, he's smiling now because he's like, oh, you didn't tell me you were going to say any of this. But it occurs to me that you are an absolute asset to organisations right now, and it might not be in the way that you have always done that. But I think right now, leaders within organisations need people like you to help them navigate out of this crisis, and that having your wisdom shared with them, this is what the world needs. So thank you, Jeremy. I want you to know that I'm going to put all his contact details here in the Facebook thing, so you can contact him. I will be editing this and put the transcription, so if you will find this beneficial to perhaps share within your organisations or with your community, I'd really appreciate that, because I really believe Jeremy has such a gift to share with the world right now. We need smart, calm, kind and visionary leaders, and this is your man. So thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Haya. Thank you very much. My face is as red as my beard now.
I wish I could see it. I can't see through that so much, but
yeah.
Good night, everybody.
I know. I put the redhead filter.
I hope you are enjoying your wine or your rum, as Jeremy is. Cheers to you all. And any questions that you have that you're thinking about when you're watching this perhaps later, please put them in the chat and we will certainly come back to them and answer them. So good night, everybody. Great to speak with you.